Thanks very much, Mike, and thanks everybody for giving me your time tonight. And I believe there's quite a crowd, which is flattering, but also quite daunting. The intention is I'll run through the our corporate presentation, a slightly slimmed down version, just because I'll just give you a bit of a background overview of where the company is at the moment, and then I'll finish on just basically a timeline of the Cononish project, which I think has got some sort of interesting sort of learning curves in it for the industry. And then we can do the any questions thereafter. So more than happy to answer whatever comes up. So just by way of starters, that's the regulatory disclaimer that you must have. A little bit about the company. We obviously have been an exploration company. We now see ourselves as becoming a producer, and we have the Scotland's first gold mine. Obviously, we'll be talking about Cononish being our flagship operation. It's small but very low cost. We're right in the bottom quartile for international producers in terms of dollar per ounce, and more specifically, from our perspective, pounds per ounce. So we are, we benefit and live by the dollar pound exchange rate also to an extent. So it's the pound price which largely impacts on us. The project is slightly unusual. It is a very small project. We're talking about up at full track, averaging 24,000 ounces per year, 72,000 tons per ore processed. But despite that being small, we've actually built it in two phases. So we've got phase one, which is what is being ramped up now, and that takes us to 36,000 tons per annum. And then in 2022, we will go to phase two. And the whole rationale for that revolves around financing, and I'll discuss that a little bit later on at the end. But essentially, we are in that sort of unusual niche where we're sort of too small to play with the big boys in terms of mining finance, and a bit too big for sort of non gold mining specific type of finance. So we found ourselves in a little bit falling between two stools, and consequently we went for the phased approach to be able to get the project off the ground. Our strategy is to become Scotland's major producer. We've got the bulk of the land package in Scotland, which we'll come to, and we believe that with the sort of the school fees and the learning curve that we've gone through getting Cononish up and running, puts us in a very strong position going forward, both to advance our own projects, and if other projects come up of a similar or better scale, we've got the expertise, so we believe we would be in a strong position to be able to do deals with other companies that didn't want to take the pain of moving from explorer into developer by themselves. The pipeline of projects I've just referred to. I say we're on the Dalradian belt, which stretches from Scandinavia across to North America. It's a global trend, and we've got the lion's share of it in Scotland. And obviously, as I mentioned before, we've got a team of people on board now who've been living with the project for a couple of years. We've developing expertise. It's not easy. In getting a team together in Scotland isn't easy, but we can come on to that in a little bit further down the project. One thing I would just discuss at this stage is the phenomenon we have of being able to sell some of our gold as Scottish gold. And the way this works is that approximately 25% of our production comes out as gravity gold. The other 75% comes out in the form of a pyrite or sulfide concentrate. That sulfide concentrate gets sold and shipped abroad, so it's lose the provenance of it. But the gravity gold, we maintain the provenance. It goes through the Edinburgh assay office, then to an audited refiner, then to an audited jeweler. The jeweler can then bring the pieces that's made with our gold back to the Edinburgh assay office to have it hallmarked. It also then gets stamped with the jeweler's mark, and it gets stamped with our own logo as well. So the cachet for that is that the jewelers can charge a premium price because it's of known origin, etc. And because they can get a premium price, we ask a premium price for itself. So in the past, when we did our little production trial in 2016, we were selling it in the order of 30% above spot, and we're expecting to do similar or slightly better in the coming years. The two of the jewelers that we've worked with to date are Sheila Fleet and Hamilton and Inches. They've been very supportive of the project. They took all the gold we took as part of our trial in 2016, and we've got indications from them that they want to take all the gold we can produce in our first year. They would take beyond that, but we've agreed to give them first dibs on that first year. Thereafter, we'll start opening it up to other players, and we've got lots of other interest for it as well. But in all our sort of economic numbers, we don't include that premium, but it is very real. And but how much of the 25% we produce will be able to sell going forward is obviously a question that still has to be answered, and therefore prudence says we don't include it. So just moving on to the sort of two areas. Obviously, I said we were an explorer. So on the right, you've got a picture of our land package there. So as you can see, sort of stretching east-west across Scotland, we've got a package of 13 exploration licenses with Cononish sitting pretty well slap bang in the middle. And on the left, you've got our other leg of our business, which is the Cononish Mine itself, which is now ramping up to getting the phase one up and running. So just to talk about Cononish in particular, we'll come on to the full timeline at the end and all the issues that we've faced and the trials and tribulations that we've gone through. If anybody may have seen it, there was a series of 3 programs on BBC Scotland called Gold Town, which sort of charted our trials and tribulations over the last few years. Which sort of brings back some not always very pleasant memories of the things you've had to go through. But it's an interesting when you see things from looking back on them, and you realise what a lot of hard work it has been. And I think that sort of all speaks to there is a barrier to entry for companies like ourselves getting going in an area like Scotland, and in particular in a national park. So we basically poured our first gold in end of November. That was from the circuit, which I'll come on to in a minute, basically comprised of a crushing, milling, gravity circuit, and then goes on to a sulfide flotation circuit. So the gold pour was from the gravity, from the commissioning of the crushing and milling and gravity. Then it's Nelson concentrator, and thereafter, first quarter of this year, we've been commissioning the rest of the circuit, including the flotation circuit, filter presses, etc., and starting to generate some sulfide concentrate. So just a little bit about the numbers, overall numbers for the mine. Although we're small, 72,000 tonnes per annum at phase 2, we're high grade at 11.7 gram per tonne gold equivalent. Working on the ratio of gold to silver price, I think that currently works out at about 11.2 gram a tonne of gold and about 0.5 of silver. Relatively simple metallurgy. We don't use any cyanidation, as I mentioned, but we still get 93% recovery gold and 90% silver. Peak production is about just under 29,000 ounces, just under 30,000 ounces of gold, and average is 21. That includes the phasing from phase 1 to phase 2. So with our 175,000 ounces recoverable, we've got approximately a 9-year mine life. In terms of just a general ore body, if I can just quickly go back to that picture here, If you look at that picture, that's a scar you can see there is an adit, a platform for an adit which was put in 89 to 91. The portal is sitting about where my cursor is now. I presume hopefully you can see my cursor. The adit goes under that waterfall, which is called East Annie, and the ore body itself is a subvertical quartz vein running approximately through the hill, approximately it comes up. So it runs away from us into that hillside. So this is a long section of that ore body. This is where we've got the resource measured is the darker red here. That is the adit coming in. The portal is just off to the right of that diagram, and the adit comes in, comes onto vein, and that has an approximate strike length 750 meters. The total adit length about just under a kilometer. We're going up and down. We go up to the top of the hill and we go down. We go up. It's about 160 meters, down 80, so 240 meters vertical interval from top to bottom. And the reason for that is predominantly the knowledge of the ore body itself and the density of drilling. We haven't done a lot of extensive drilling at depth, and we haven't done any extensive drilling on strike. And the company's sort of strategy from the early days has been to get this ore body, given that we knew the scale of exploiting this ore body would be limited by its geometry to the approximately 72,000 tons per annum, and we had an 8-year mine life at that rate. Therefore, their thinking was, well, let's get this into production. We can then use cash flow from that to replace and expand the resource reserves at Cononish and to fund the further exploration on the area that we've got. Just a little bit on the right, just to show the form the gold comes in. It's largely as comes in the form of electrum and native gold. Generally very small. We rarely see any visible gold. It's generally sub 100 microns, and in the order of sometimes as well as 10 micron. Just to go back to, I was explaining earlier about the processing route. So from a mining perspective, that's the adit going in, the existing adit. We then break away. We've got a footwall drive coming in. We then have a system of ramps coming up. We then have 15 meters sub-level intervals, vertical intervals of 15 meters, with stopes and pillars every 45. That goes up to basically we develop out, and then we do long hole open stoping on retreat. So for the first sort of 18 months of production, we are producing from development ore, and certainly when those sub-levels in and we start retreating, we actually start getting the stoping ore. So there is a step up in grade when you move from development to stoping. In terms of the processing, as I say, it comes out from underground, actually not quite up there. Not uphill like this. Actually comes out on the flat with trucks, but it goes into the milling and crushing circuit. Having gone through the mill, goes through a Nelson. The gold that the gravity concentrate then gets tabled, and that's what produces the Scottish gold, which we can say sell at a premium. The tails from that, plus the rest of the product from the mill goes through the classification and onto the sulfide circuit. So we've got 2 banks of flotation banks. That flotation concentrate gets dried and pressed and gets sold abroad, and the tails then gets dried in another filter press, taken out with dumps of trucks and built into a dry stack system of tailings facility. And that in itself is an interesting feature of the project. We initially, when the project was initially designed, it was with a very conventional valley impoundment type dam scenario. The geometry of the glen where the mine is situated is relatively steep. The topography is steep. And as a result of that, you can't just have a very small starter dam and then start your impoundment and then lift your dam as you went. you pretty well had to have the full impoundment dam in place before you can start. And having to have the full dam in place obviously meant a significant amount of capital. So of the original estimates of some 30 million for the whole project, over 5 million was going towards this valley impoundment dam. And so consequently, if you wanted to phase the project, if you wanted to say, okay, well, look, we haven't got enough capital to build the whole thing in one go, can we build it half and then use that to fund the second half? The problem was you still had to pay this 5 million, you had to build this tailings facility out front. So that really put the kibosh on any form of phasing. And it was only when we looked at it in more detail and had another go and decided, well, look, can we use a dry stack system? And essentially what we do is just take the quartzite, once it's had the sulfides extracted out of it, it comes out as basically a damp sand. You then take that in your tipper trucks, put it down in layers onto a drainage layer. When we're going to use it to build a very natural looking terrain, which mimics the sort of glacial terrain in the surrounding glens, and then rehabilitate as we go. And the advantage of that is we've now moved 5 million of capex into effectively 5 million of operating costs across the life of the mine. So it becomes very much sort of pay as you go and therefore scalable. And therefore, without this going to a dry stack system, we probably wouldn't have managed to get this project off the ground. So that was a key enabling change, was the move to this type of tailings facility. So just coming on to, as I said earlier, we're currently doing phase one, which is 36,000 tonnes per annum, averages just under 10,000 ounces. The reason that that's low, as I said, is because A, the tonnage, B, we're in the lower grade as we do in development, or as we get into the project and the stoping kicks in, the grade picks up, and obviously then when we go to phase two in 2022, the tonnage picks up, which pushes our peak production up into 2024. And thereafter, this graph, which shows the undulations in annual gold production, are just as, because we're on a tree basis, we're working our way through the ore body. We obviously try and pick the best areas first, but to a certain extent, you're constrained by where the grades sit as you extract them. Phase two is worth talking about. When we designed the project, we started looking at it from the point of view of it being well, we want to minimize capex, therefore we'll do it in two phases. What's the simplest and easiest way of doing that? Well, we'll split it in half and we'll build a big building and we'll put one train down one side of the building, and then when we've got enough money, we'll build another train in parallel down the other side of the building, and we'll double our tonnage. And that's all theory, fine in theory, but then you start realizing, well, actually, when you actually come to engineer things, a crushing circuit, for example, that will do 72,000 tonnes per annum costs you about 10% more than one that will do 36. So it becomes impractical from a space and cost perspective to actually look at splitting that into two smaller parts. So what we currently have is actually a hybrid between phase one and phase two, whereby the crushing circuit is fully scaled for phase two. The milling circuit would consist of two mills. We've got one out of the two with the foundations in place for the second. But we are finding that we can probably do more through the current mill than we originally estimated. So there's a question mark as whether we'll need the second mill or not. We then go into a bank of flotation cells, which will be duplicated for phase two. And then from there, it goes into a filter press, which the filter press itself has been scaled for phase two, but we have the number of plates in it that are appropriate for phase one. So we've got a reduced number of plates. When we go to phase two, we'll just simply add more plates into the existing press, and we'll add a thickener, which is relatively low cost. So phase two will be simpler and easier than phase one, because part of the infrastructure is already there. The other sort of thing that's coming out of the lessons we're learning as we're commissioning phase one is that we believe some elements of what we've got are probably going to be able to do quite a bit more than we had originally anticipated. And therefore, we have the question of, well, what should phase two really be? Because we could either say, well, because what we've got can do is performing better, perhaps we don't need to spend quite as much to achieve phase two. Or we could take the view was actually, well, should we actually be doing a bit, making phase two instead of 72,000 tons? Should we be aiming for something slightly bigger and going forward? And the decision on that will largely rest on two factors. One is actually thoroughly bedding down phase one, so we know exactly what phase one is capable of and the various elements in it are capable of. And then secondly, well, if we're going to go bigger, what is our prospect for finding more or being able to expand Cononish itself? And on that element, we are becoming more and more bullish as well. So we'll make that decision probably later this year, as I say, once we've got phase one up and running and well bedded down, and we've got some more information coming on the near mine exploration. So this is just to run through some of the metrics for phase two, or basically life of mine. As I said, at £430 per ounce, this is all in sustaining cost once the phase two capital has been expended and we're in a steady state going forward, looking at just replacements, etc. So very, very, very low cost, but as I say, relatively small project, but it does have very, very profitable, 70% operating margin, and this is all based on a 1450 gold price, sorry, 1250 gold price, and one can take one's own view on where the gold price is going to go to from here. Just a little bit about environmental social governance. This is in the sort of corporate slide, but I'll expand more on the planning issues at the end. I think as you'll be aware, we are in a national park. We are probably, one of the most regulated and monitored, definitely mining operations, probably any operations from the Loch Lomond Trossachs National Park. We're definitely their most closely monitored project that they've got. This for us and for the parks has been a learning curve. The issues we had getting the planning permission, there was a lot of philosophical debate about whether mining and national parks can coexist, or are they mutually exclusive by definition. The debate raged around, well, some people felt that the environment needed to be kept pristine, and therefore mining shouldn't exist. The other side of the coin is, well, there's people there who will depend on opportunities like this for employment, and if you deny every opportunity to the people who live there, effectively you're also reenacting highland clearance and driving the communities out of those areas. And in the end, the parks came down on the side of, well, they are there for the benefit of the physical environment and the communities that live in that environment, and therefore, as long as the mine restores everything that it disturbs, and in addition to that, provides additional long-term benefits, so that when the mine is long gone, not only have we restored everything that we have disturbed, but we have done some good for the glen, then that is compensation for the inconvenience of having us operating for 10 years. So I think we do have a very good relationship with the parks. It's been, when that's been forged through a long and at times difficult negotiation and the management of expectations from our side and their side as to what they require and what we're expecting to deliver. And we also benefit from a fantastic relationship with the community. So those two things have been sort of critical to getting this project to where it is. Just to come on and spend a little bit of time about our exploration. As I mentioned at the beginning, we've got this belt of the Dalrodian belt running across Scotland through into Northern Ireland. Obviously hosts the Dalradian resource which is several million ounces. I think it was up to 6 last time I looked. You've got Galantis there, and a couple of the smaller projects. So it is that we are in known gold territory. Our view as we move from being an explorer into being a producer is we're not sort of here to make sort of fantastic RNSs on exciting new deposits. We're here to find the next mine, and we need to do that as cost effectively as possible. But within the constraints of, we need to find it and to be able to expand the production from Cononish. So we've obviously got a ticking clock there with Cononish now mining. We then have to replace and build on our life from there. The approach we've now got is what we believe is a very good one, in the sense that it is cost effective. It starts with cheap activities, and we leave the expensive stuff to the end. It's been developed over the last couple of years, but it's fundamentally different to what we have trialed, over the past decades, in that we are very heavily guided by ionic leach. And for those of you may be aware of it, ionic leach is a more highly sensitive, lower tenor reading than whole sample digestion. So effectively, instead of looking for how much gold you've got in any particular sample, you're looking for how many metallic ions, be they gold or other metals, are sitting on the surface of particles. So it could be by doing that, you effectively overcome the nugget effect of having a particular grain of gold in any particular sample. It gives you a lower tenure, and it gives you, we find it's giving us a more meaningful value. So, as I say, that's just our spread of concessions and an idea of what we've done over which. The way we start off is we start off with drainage sampling. So we go on all these water courses that you can see marked on the topo map here. These water courses have been sampled, and then the anomalous results from that contoured, and that's what gives you these pink blobs. This is we started over Cononish, because Cononish obviously is a known deposit. So we said, well, let's see if we can find it using this technique. And lo and behold, we did find it, and it looks, makes a lot of sense. The black box you can see there is the actual Cononish ore body itself. That is just the scale of the Cononish ore body. So that's the 750 meter long strike ore body. Interestingly, the border of the national park runs just north of Cononish. Outside the national park, we've got the Ben Uli anomaly, which is even more significant than Cononish from a drainage perspective. But leaving the drainage is the first indicator. From the drainage, we then go to a grid of soil sampling. We ran the grid of soil sampling over Cononish. That same black box is replicated over here. That's the actual Cononish ore body, and lo and behold, that stood out. But what is also brought out is anomalies along strike to the northeast, and some anomalies to the southeast. And what it doesn't show here, what we also then in the third step of this is looking at geophysics. We look at IP and VLF, and we believe we've got a lower, a deeper offsetting. There's a fault running across the end of the Cononish ore body. We believe the Cononish vein has been displaced along that fault and may well be sitting up here underneath at depth. And that's one. So all both these soil targets and the VLF targets at depth will be subject to obviously drilling going forward. But if you imagine we've got our 175,000 ounces come out of that black box, and we're looking for extensions of mine, you can easily see that there's enough eggs in that basket to make a significant expansion on the 175,000. So that basically sort of summarizes where the project is. Coming on to talking you through the sort of timeline of where we got to. the ore body itself was discovered in the 80s by NX, an Irish company. They developed that adit. They didn't quite get to the fault dimension, so it's still on ore at the end of the adit. They, for whatever reason, decided to refocus their funds and activities elsewhere. They sold it to Caledonia, who re-evaluated some of the data, did a little bit more drilling, and then after a period found they had problems getting the planning permission, so they then chucked in the towel, sold it to somebody else, until ultimately it was acquired by ScotGold in 2007. Having got it, it was a case of picking up a lot more ground, doing more exploration, a little bit more drilling on Cononish, but the main activity from 2007 to 2012 was getting planning permission approved, and that was done through initially through Sterling, and then halfway through the process, the national park was expanded over the area, so it meant going back to square one. So that's really why it took 5 years to get from 2000 to 2012. Was the first planning application. First of all, it was approved by Stirling Council, and then that got superseded by Loch Lomond. Loch Lomond then narrowly disapproved the next application. They went back to the drawing board, and 2012, Loch Lomond and Trossachs Park actually approved it again. So 2012, we're then starting with planning permission. 2013, the development study was completed, and in end of 2013, where the mine was about to be launched, funding was being put together, and everything looked hunky dory. Unfortunately, if I look back through your gold price graphs, you'll see that coincides in 2013 with a steep drop off in the gold price from 1800, I think it was, to something like 1400. That drop in the gold price was scuppered the financing, and so the whole mine basically sort of went. The whole mine got put on hold. The company itself was then in a difficult position because it expanded a lot of spent a lot of money in anticipation of getting the project going. And then when we went through in 2008, 2013, early 2014, the mine was, or the company was recapitalized, largely with input from Nat LaRue and a bunch of other shareholders who came in. And on the back of that recapitalization, we basically went back to the drawing board. So went back to redoing the reserve and resource estimate, redoing the feasibility study. The study looked at the AMC study, decided what was okay and where there were any holes in it. So gap analysis, and filled that gap, and ended up with a what new and what we felt was robust resource reserve estimate and study. So having done that in early 2015, you sort of thought, well, that's great. All we've got to do now is go back, get some money, and we're off to the races. And that's really when the sort of chickens came home to roost in terms of going to the big banks, the likes of Societe Generale or Paribas, or any of those who are, Macquarie's, any of those who would traditionally finance gold projects, all felt that we were too small. We were looking for sort of 25 to 30 million at that point in time for the full project. And not only were they sort of reluctant to go for the money or provide that sort of money, the issue for us was twofold. A couple of them, they were all very, they loved the due diligence, and the mining teams loved what they saw. But when it went higher up the echelons of their structure, it's a case of, well, is this enough business for us to tie up our whole, resource teams to? From our perspective, it was going to take sort of 6 months of due diligence from the bank. It was going to cost a couple of million in fees. It was going to, and then at the end of it, you're still waiting to hear from the credit committee whether you get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And so in the end, so we basically gave up on trying to attract sort of sensibly priced senior debt. So we then decided, well, what do we do next? And the one of the sort of, if one didn't go to the senior guys who understood things, then everybody else you talk to, when you talk about gold in Scotland, you sort of get this slightly glazed look and a rolling of the eyeballs, and isn't that some sort of vague thing that comes out of Harry Potter or something? It's a mythical existence, but doesn't really actually happen in real life. So we came up with the idea of, well, when this adit was developed in 2000 89 to 90, the spoil from that adit, which was on reef, basically sat on the side of the hill. So we had a stockpile there of some 7,000 tons, which we estimated at about 7 or 8 grams a ton. We said, well, can't we get some sort of little plant up there on site and be able to use that to extract some of the gold, and at least proof of concept that it would firm up some of the metallurgical test work we've done, and it would just be able to slap a bar of it on whoever's which financier we're talking to today, and say, look, this actually came out of the mine. So we went ahead and did that, and that was very successful. It definitely we got gold out, and we generated an awful lot of interest in the project. Obviously, it was the recoveries weren't anything to write home about, because we weren't using flotation. It was a purely crushing to a coarse size, about 500 micron, and then using a very coarse gravity circuit consisting of spirals and tables. But it did the job. We got some gold out, and we generated a lot of interest. The other thing it did was, in order to be able to operate that, we had to think about, well, how are we going to deal with tailings? Because it's a really small quantity, but we will still be producing tails, and that's where we came up with the idea of using what we call a SEDI bag. So it's like a big builder's bag, holds about 400 tons. You pump the slurry into that, the water seeps out, and the solid stays in the bag. We got that through the parks, agreed to that. We got that. And it was that sort of process of doing that experimentation on the SEDI bags which led to us looking at whether we can, in fact, use some sort of different tailings deposition methodology, and we came up with the dry stack idea. So based on the development from the bulk processing trial, we then did an updated BFS in 2017 using the dry stack methodology and a phased approach, which all came together very nicely. We then in 2018 because using the new tailings methodology meant a new planning permission from early 2017 through to end of 2018 was now we had to reapply for planning completely. So that was a brand new planning application which came through, although obviously a lot of it was similar to what was there before. It's as these things go, the conditions and the requirements became ever more stringent. So we had to comply with all that, and we finally got our consent in October 2018. With that in hand, we started the construction of the mine in 2019. But the learning curve is that in terms of getting planning consent, getting the planning consent is the one thing. But we have something like 57 conditions we have to meet, and of those conditions, they all relate to a whole variety of things, but access, activity, construction. When we do doing construction, you'd have methodology statements. These have to be done in great detail. So in other words, you can't actually write your construction methodology statement until you've got your contractor on board who's going to do the job. He is the person who actually has to do that. The contractors we got, and it wasn't peculiar to them, were sort of also then it was a learning curve for them, because what the quality or the standard of CMS or construction method statement that was required was way above and beyond anything they had done before. So it took us from October 18 through to September 19, a year effectively of getting the contractors to work with the parks to work out a methodology and then provide the necessary mitigation measures that will go with that methodology to an acceptable level. So it just goes to show the planning process once you get your permit is not over and done with. You still there's a long road to go beyond that. Anyway, that said, September 2009 we got underway, and then the next issue which hit us was peat. Now peat was is obviously a known factor. It's ubiquitous across the area. We've got peat everywhere, and we've done our peat probing. We had our topo maps, and we knew the depth. We have a very small site, very confined site, and that's sort of by choice, because we want to. It makes me go better to have a small site you can look after well than a big site that is more difficult to manage. The parks obviously want us to have a small site as possible. So all factors pointed towards having a small site. But in terms of doing any civil works, the trouble with having a small site is a little bit like a game of Tetris. You have to shuffle things around. You have to move peat out of the way before you can expose the till underneath. You then have to remove the unsuitable. You then have to place that where that's got to go. And the whole thing is a game of shuffling things around. And what actually caught us out was in the 89 to 90, when the original adit had been developed, a lot of peat had been bulldozed down, moved from its in situ position into a big embankment, and we hadn't realised that. So that embankment didn't have the density of peat probing in it. With hindsight, we realised it should have done. And so when you average that out, you didn't see the depth, but there was an artificially deep pocket of peat where that bank had been created in between 89 and 91. And it was that additional peat which, when we would in itself was not a problem. The problem was we didn't have enough space to store that bit of peat initially to create access to the rest of the site. So we then had to go through a process of working with the parks to find somewhere where we could put this peat temporarily before bringing it back. And peat in itself is a major issue for the SEPA, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the park. So that was quite a long process. The parks, I say, everyone. I would say none of these organisations have been in any way, shape, or form obstructive, but the standards that they require and the detail they require has been onerous, and getting to that as well has taken the time. Anyway, we resolved the peat issue. We found a temporary storage area, got approval for that from the parks. Everybody was happy, and of course, the next thing is we got locked down by COVID in 2020, and finally got back up and running, so limited capacity about mid-year, which led to, as I mentioned earlier, we got the gravity circuit up and running and made our first gold pour in September, and we're now have commissioning and ramping up phase one. So then the next step is to go to phase two. I say we'll consider exactly what that consists of over the course of this year, but we think it might well be something bigger than we had originally anticipated if the optimistic outlook we've got for near-term prospects for finding more reserves around Cononish bear fruit. So that is essentially our story.